Most churches want better open rates on their emails. You want to send better email, of course. So you probably worry about things like, how often should I send it? Or how long should it be? What type of graphics should I use? How should it look? But maybe, just maybe, you're forgetting the most important reason people want to open your email in the first place. Hey there, it's Matthew Warner, and this is the Finding Uno Show. Welcome to the Finding Uno Show. Who's Uno? Oh, you know Uno. He's that one lost sheep the shepherd leaves the 99 to go after, and we are here to help you find him. I'm your host, Matthew Warner, joined by my co-host, Matthew Sewell. What's up, Matt?
Hey, Matt. How's it going?
Going great. Thanks for being here. This is a show about evangelization, and we'll be teaching you ways to communicate smarter, revitalize your church, and become the church leader that you were meant to be. Today, we are talking about the number one reason people open your email. So last time we started it off talking about whether people read email at all anymore and whether it's an important communication channel, which of course it is. But the next question is, well, how do we do it well? And one of those things that, of course, people are always trying to do with their emails is get people to open them in the first place. Otherwise, they don't do very good, don't do very much good. So today's topic we thought we'd start off with is, what is the main reason people open your email? What do you think, Matt?
Yeah, I was thinking about this question before we started, and just thinking of the emails that I got today. So I just started getting this sweet daily newsletter that kind of condenses all the news down, but it's always really witty. It's, I know that it's always going to add value to my life, and so when I have time, I really look forward to opening it. But then there's also those like 20 that I just click, select all, and delete every day. Why I still subscribe to them, I don't know. But, I just either don't care about that. I don't know how they got my email. I don't know really much about that particular company. One is like a subscription service that we clearly canceled, and then they just keep sending us stuff, every other day. So yeah, it tends to be just I think the relationship that I have with who's sending me the email.
Yeah, well, you said the right word there, I think, because I think it comes down to relationship. So we, and I encourage everyone listening to think about that for yourself. When you go through your own inbox, you naturally jump down to certain emails. You always read certain ones and you skip past a lot of the others. And so as a church leader who is trying to send good email and you want to send communications that people are going to actually read, think about why you do that. So if we think about it the other way around, I think there's a lot of factors, and there's a lot of things we're going to talk about in future shows that talk about or that are going to help you increase your open rate and do better and send better email in lots of different ways. So there's lots of techniques, and you've probably read about a lot of them out there, but we're going to talk about them from a church perspective, church communications perspective. But I think it ultimately underlying the most important number one reason is relationship. So it's more about the from name, so if you think about the from name, and I'm not saying get tricky with how you change the from name, but like, what does the from name mean to you? Is it from a person that is meaningful in your life? Is it from an organization that's doing something interesting or meaningful that you care about? And sort of within that, what is your email relationship like? So you kind of hit it on, Matt, like you want to read that daily, update email you get, probably because your relationship so far with that sender was that every day when you go to open it, you enjoy it. You get something worthwhile. It's a great use of your time, right? So your relationship in the past was a good one. It was worthwhile. And so that's kind of the underlying key point I want to make, is that your open rate is something that is largely determined by things long before that email ever even lands in that person's inbox.
Yeah, I would totally agree. And I'm thinking of all the bad examples that I've seen. I just thought of some more as you were talking there, but you're totally right. So what are some ways for our listeners, or I guess viewers out there, to build that good relationship, especially this email relationship, a relationship that gets good email open rates, understanding all of the possibilities for that to go sideways or for that to be out of our control? What are some ways that people can build a good email relationship?
The first thought is your personal one-on-one relationship with that person. So that's probably one of the most powerful things. And especially if you think about your own inbox, that you jump to those ones that are from your closest friends, family, people that are sending you something with a personal message in it, right? So the more you know the people offline, the more you've spent time building a real relationship with them, the more likely they are to open it. That's probably the most powerful thing you can do. Now, the next question is, well, how do you scale that? So if I'm sending this to 100 or 1,000 people, which in many cases churches are, you obviously can't scale your one-on-one relationships quite the same way. So it depends on the context here, but first and foremost, it's important to understand that to the extent that you can build personal relationships as a leader of this group of people, the more effective you will be from that standpoint. But the second one is what we already sort of alluded to, which is the history. So you have to start building your reputation as a sender, you have to start building that email relationship, just like a dating relationship with somebody else. It starts off having to earn that trust. And you don't just start off with having trust. I'm going to open every one of your emails. You have to earn it. So you give them, when you send an email and they happen to open it that one time, you have to make the most of it. And then you build on that over and over again. And if you do that enough times in a row, all of a sudden they have grown to expect that and know that it's there, and they will jump to your email to get it because they know there's something really worthwhile there.
Yeah, so I have a question related to that. I think of, especially in a church context, a lot of times, whether like a pastor changes or staff turnover, we all know the church is human and our parishes are run by people who are imperfect. And who have engaged in not so smart digital practices, among other things. And so, what do you do if, say, there was a church secretary who was terrible and just made everybody mad, and half the people left, and everybody else subscribed, like all this stuff? How do you even start to turn that around when you're kind of deep in a hole from day one?
Yeah, there's no shortcut. It's like getting burned in a relationship. And it unfortunately, what you're describing is really common. That a lot of times leaders are coming into a situation in their ministry or at their church where the past communications have not been that great, or they've been even exploitive in a sense, where it's like the only time I hear from you is when you need something or when you want money or all those kinds of things. And so people a lot of times find themselves digging themselves out of that hole because you're now a representative of that relationship. It's not a totally new relationship. So you have to do the hard work of starting to dig out. There's not a shortcut. Certainly there's some things you could do to try to make it feel different. Like this is a new relationship, right? So you could use a new way of doing it. You can call it something different. You can announce a new initiative. Those kind of things help because it says, oh, okay, this is something different than before. I'll give it another chance, So that's something to think about if you're coming into a situation like that. And I'm sure that's a pretty common one.
Yeah. I was thinking in terms of practicality, how do we make something like that worth their time? I mean, so obviously it's there's no shortcuts, like you said. It just takes time and hard work and intentionality. I know one phrase that we always like to say is, I didn't have time to write you a short email, so I wrote you a long one, right? So, I mean, there might be one practical tip, and that could be the practical tip, honestly, if you do nothing else. But in terms of practicality, how does a person who's starting this process or just trying to build on it, how do they make it worth their recipient's time?
Yeah, I think you're hitting on something that's going to be probably a subject we cover in many different ways over many episodes here, because I think there's a lot of really creative, fun things to do with email that could make email great again, and I think it can be, because email in a sense is a pretty magical tool we take for granted, that I can send a message, I can type something, and this message ends up in one of the most intimate inboxes of all of my people in a moment. It's really powerful. The reason we think it's old news or like that it doesn't work anymore is because we haven't been using it as well as we should, or because it's been abused by a lot of other people. And so we've got to overcome that. But there are ways to overcome it. And when you get to using it well, it can be really powerful. And so that's some of the stuff we're going to be trying to do. But in terms of today's episode and building this relationship, certainly you hit on, I think, one of the biggest ones. So that's one of my favorite quotes. I didn't have time to write you a short letter, so I wrote you a long one instead. It applies, unfortunately, so well to church communication. And so you have to do the work for them. And it's not just in length, right? What we're saying is I took the time, instead of just telling you all the things I want you to know and throwing all the information in here that might be helpful, I took the extra time and effort to curate it, to get it down to what its essence is, to get it to the short, sweet, real meat of what I need you to know, and then took all the other stuff out. And that takes work. That takes time. And so that's why I didn't have time to write you a short one. I wrote you a long one instead. But you got to take the time to do it, because it's a way you're showing respect for the other person's time. So if every time I open your email, it's this long thing, on one hand, it's just a practical thing. Most of the time people open your email, they don't have 5 minutes to read it. They don't have 10 minutes to read it. They just don't. Most people have about 10 seconds. And then they're on to the next email, or they're picking their head up to go start driving again because the red light turned green, right? So unfortunately, but they're only giving you those few seconds. And so you got to be able to get to the point. That's one practical side. But the other side is this relationship building. If it's a lot of work for me to go through all this information, and I find that most of it's not really for me, which segmenting lists, that's another topic for another show as well, which is really important. But if I go through it and most of it's not for me, and it's kind of not really well thought out, and you repeat yourself, and it's not said in an efficient way, and it's not thoughtful, then that says you don't really care about my time and my relationship with you. And so next time I'm going to skip past that email because I don't have time to read it and it was too much work. And so really doing the work to get it to its essence and say it well is really, really important. That's the first part. Second is, don't forget to have some fun and have some personality. We're going to cover a bunch of these in the next show. We're going to talk about subject lines, right? And this kind of leads into some of these fun things. But don't be afraid to be interesting. Let your own personality come through. Have some fun with it. Number one, fun is a good thing. Two, you're competing with a lot of other things in people's inboxes, which are fun, and they're human, and they're going to naturally be drawn to the things that are more fun. And so if you can have good, healthy information, helpful information, something that's edifying, something that, pulls you into the mission, all the things you want to accomplish with this email, but it's also fun, then that's a win-win-win, as Michael Scott says. So that's what you want. You want a win-win-win situation. So think about how you can make it entertaining. Think about ask the question, what could I do to make this email surprising? Where they open it and it's like, oh, I didn't expect that, right? I like to think of it like, what would make somebody high five me the next time I see them because of this email? Like, they're going to see me and they go, that was awesome. High five, right? You're like, I don't have time for that. I don't have time to do all that kind of stuff. And you got to get past this, because what you don't have time for is writing a bunch of emails that nobody reads. What you don't have time for is creating these wonderful programs and events and services that hardly anyone shows up to. That's what you don't have time for. Communication is the lifeblood of your leadership. As a leader, your communication is the lifeblood of that leadership. And if you're not taking the time to do it well, don't be surprised if your leadership fails and people don't respond. And so we have to find ways you have to take the time to make it surprising, make it interesting, make it exciting for people, get it short and sweet so you're respecting their time. And so that in the end, when they get done reading it, you want them to go, wow, that was really worth my time. That was great. And then they're looking forward to the next one, that anticipation for the next message. Now you've won. Now email works for you. It's just like a normal relationship, like if I spend time with you and I didn't have any fun and it was kind of a drag, it was a lot of work, I'm not going to want to respond to the next invitation to hang out with you. And that's what an email is. An email is, hey, spend a minute with me, spend 2 minutes with me, and let's talk about something we both care about. But it's got to be worthwhile, right? After they have that experience. So if you do that over and over again, people will start to learn, and you'll build that relationship, which is ultimately the number one reason people are going to open your email.
Yeah, might be getting a little philosophical for a podcast like this, but it seems like nobody likes a taker, right? Everybody likes a giver, and and we all have to be receivers in some sense. I mean, as churches, obviously, we have to be asking and receiving, fundraising, volunteering, all that sort of thing. But like, nobody likes a taker when it's a friendship. When you just hang out and they're just like telling you about all their problems, like nobody cares about all your problems. Like maybe in the right context, sure. But if you're giving more than it's like the stewardship principle. It's like, don't ask for anything 9 times out of 10 or more, so that the one time you do ask for something, that relationship is solid. So I mean, maybe that could be our final consideration. I know we're running up against time a little bit for this one, but
well, you're getting philosophical. It made me think of another philosophical thing. Made me think of Aristotle. So I think there's all those practices that you're talking about, which I think those are episodes in themselves of how do we get creative? And so we want to help all of you listening out there to get better at writing these emails and sending communications, whether it's emails or otherwise. These are announcements. These all apply to every kind of communication that you create. But it made me think, I think underlying this for me, so Aristotle talks about, when he talks about friendship, he talks about the need for a transcendent third. And I remember hearing Bishop Barron talk about this, talking about friendship and relationship, and that a good relationship between two people is one that persists in a good way, keeps going. It requires a transcendent third. This transcendent third is something that they both share in common, something that is bigger than themselves, and that without a transcendent third, that relationship devolves into a what he calls a shared a selfish egotism, or it just ultimately ends because there's nothing holding it together. So this transcendent third could be something, as long as it's bigger than the two people, it transcends them, something they share together, but it could be something that lasts for a short time, like our kids are both on the same sports team. Okay. So we're friends, we talk, we're connected, but then after that, like there's nothing left to hold it together. And so the relationship tends to end. Right. Or it could be something that persists, but maybe it's something kind of trivial, like a favorite sports team. So that's what our friendship revolves around. It's this transcendent third. There you go. Go Broncos.
Go Broncos.
Or it could be something that's, of course, something lifelong and much bigger, like a marriage, a commitment to serve God together by faithfully serving each other till death do you part. And anything in between all of those things, but that's something that third thing that binds you both together. It sounds kind of maybe dramatic, but a good email relationship needs that transcendent third too. So ask yourself, like, what is the transcendent third in this relationship? What's the shared thing that's bigger than both of us that we care about together? Now, for a church, it's kind of easy in the sense that, like, it's our mission as a church. It's evangelization. It's discipleship. It's whatever this particular ministry is doing together that I'm passionate about and care about. The trouble is that a lot of times our communications don't tap into that, and they're not communicating that mission and that transcendent third very well. And so it loses its fizzle. It's sizzle, I should say. It fizzles and it loses its sizzle. And that's what you don't want to lose. So think about that when you're communicating. That applies to your email as well. That if you want people to be excited about this other thing you're doing together, make sure you're talking about it and making that the heart of what you're communicating, not just passing information from one person to another in some meaningless way.
Yeah, I think that's great. And that's probably a good place to cap it for today. So yeah, be sure to subscribe, of course, if you want to hear about other episodes, but we're going to move on. That's it for this week, for our content for this week, but we'll save some time for, I think, one question we got time for today. So we're going to bounce into our People Got Church Problems segment. Okay, our question today comes from Henry. Henry writes, my biggest frustration is that we do not have a complete updated list of email contacts for our parishioners. Also, some don't have cell phones either and only want to be reached by voice phone, landline. How do we fix this?
Good question, Henry. First of all, I love that we're calling this section the People Got Church Problems section. I don't know if we'll keep calling it that, but that was what we started calling this because all the questions we had gotten initially, we were asking people what their biggest frustrations were. And so everyone was just telling us all these things they were frustrated with. And so it got titled the People Got Church Problems segment, and hopefully that'll stick. We'll see. But yeah, so Henry's question is a good one. So two parts. So one is about cell phones and being, people that don't have cell phones and can only be reached by voice phone. The main thing to think about with that is that not every communication is going to reach everybody. That's just always the case. So you can't use that as the standard of whether something's going to work or not, because all channels will fall short in that sense. The good news is that usually the people that don't do cell phones, maybe they can only be reached by voice phone, are either pretty faithful at their email, answering their email, or they're pretty faithful about reading the bulletin because they really love the bulletin and that's more what they like to do, or listening to announcements or those other things. So normally the people that fall into that category are already getting your message pretty faithfully. And so it's usually not a problem that really needs solving all the time. However, like in Flocknote, we've built in some things to help with this. So first of all, we have a feature where if someone doesn't have if you send a text message out or an email, and you don't have they don't have a operating cell phone that'll receive text messages, you can tell it to actually voice call, and it'll read the text message to them over the phone or leave a voicemail with it. And so it actually takes care of that. Second, it'll also send that as an email if they have an email address on file. So they'll actually get the text message, but they just get the same text message as an email rather than as a text message. So we've built in some things to try to help with that. But the first part of the question, the frustration with not having a complete or updated list of email contacts in the first place is definitely a challenge. So a lot of churches, when they first gather information, are not asking for that kind of information. They're just getting name, email address, maybe some sacraments you've had, whatever. So number one is make sure you're asking for that. So that should be, and honestly, that should be that along with cell phone are the two most important things to get first from people. So before you worry about getting their first name and last name and getting their mailing address and family members and other, sacraments they've had or not, get their email address. Right? Get their cell phone number, because once you have those, now you can get all the other information. And we've built that into how Flocknote operates, where you start with that most important contact info. So that's the first recommendation is you got to shift your mindset to that being the most important thing to gather when people show up or when they come to register, or when they show up in the office or say, hey, we want to be members here. We're just visitors here. What do we do? Give us your email address if you'd like, and we'll send you information about our community, about things you can get involved in, whatever the case may be, right? So you have to change your mindset to where you're always thinking about getting that email address. And then another important point is that your church probably has more email addresses than you realize. It's just they're spread out in lots of different spots. So each ministry has its own separate spreadsheet or inbox full of emails, contact lists from individual youth ministers or faith formation directors or pastors who have collected it for their own purposes for a particular event or something that was happening, but you don't have anything that's brought it all together in a meaningful, concise, organized way. And so you need something to do that. That's what we designed Flocknote to do as well, to where you empower every ministry leader to communicate with it, but then as they use it, it's automatically building a combined list for the entire church database, keeping them up to date. And because they're getting used by these individuals, they stay up to date, and you've built a more complete list. And there's lots of other tactics too. I mean, sometimes you got to just ask. Sometimes doing a sign up Sunday where you give people the ability to text in on Sunday or at an event you're doing, and allowing them to text in their email address and capture it. Again, there's different systems you can do that with. Flocknote is designed to do that really well as well. So hopefully that gives you some ideas on how to help that, Henry.
Yeah, thanks again, Henry, for that question. So that wraps it up for today. So we got one last thing. We're going to pass it over to our friend Liz, who is going to see where we might be finding Uno today. Liz?
Thanks, Matt. Today we spotted Uno in Elmhurst, Illinois with our friends at Visitation Parish. Ladies, you look wonderful in your navy blue Uno tees. Thank you so much for sharing this photo and for your most important work. If you find Uno, snap a photo and send it to us at howdy@findinguno.com, and we may feature you in a future episode of the Finding Uno Show. I also wanted to tell you about an amazing new feature we recently launched here at Flocknote, and that is signups. So whether you need an easy way to register people for Sunday, limit capacity, get a head count, or maybe you just need to know who's bringing any apple pie to the potluck, signups is the tool for you. So with signups, you can create, organize, and share simple signups with the touch of a button. And finally, we would be honored if you left us a review or liked and subscribed wherever you get your podcasts. And if you leave a review on the iTunes, send us an email at howdy@findinguno.com and we will send you a snazzy pair of flock socks. That's all for today. Thanks everyone for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.